You might think you know Swamp Thing, but here are 12 facts you may not have known about the Avatar of the Green. Swamp Thing first appeared in 1971's House of Secrets number 92, in a story by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. After the success of the original story, Swamp Thing was given his own solo title, also by Wein and Wrightson, which began in 1972 and ran for 24 issues until 1976. According to Wein, he conceived of the character while riding the subway, but for a long time he didn't have a title for the new feature, only referring to it as the Swamp Thing I'm working on, and thus was the origin of the name. The original Swamp Thing story from House of Secrets was set in the early days of the 20th century and starred a scientist named Alex Olson. When the concept was given its own title, the premise was moved up to the then contemporary 1970s and starred a different scientist named Alec Holland, who was transformed into a plant creature in a similar way. Marvel Comics also debuted a swamp creature character in 1971 called the Man-Thing, who actually appeared about a month before the original Swamp Thing story. Man-Thing was co-created by Jerry Conway, who was Wein's roommate at the time. Nevertheless, Marvel never sued because both characters were notably similar to a swamp monster from Golden Age comics called the Heap. The Swamp Thing concept was revived with a new series called Saga of the Swamp Thing in 1982, in order to coincide with Wes Craven's movie adaptation. With issue 20 of that series, Len Wein, now the editor of the book, decided to take a shot on a then unknown British writer named Alan Moore, which would turn out to be one of the most significant editorial decisions in comics history. In Moore's second issue, number 21, in a story called The Anatomy Lesson, he revealed that Swamp Thing was not actually a man who had changed into a plant, but a plant who thought it was a man. He would further reveal that there had been hundreds of Swamp Things, including Alex Olson from the original House of Secrets story. These Swamp Things were defenders of the green, a metaphysical network that connects all plant life on Earth. Moore's run on Swamp Thing soon incorporated sophisticated suspense and mature themes, and was the first mainstream comic to abandon the Comics Code Authority altogether. However, one controversial story by Moore's successor, Rick Veitch, in which Swamp Thing travels in time and meets Jesus, was scrapped for being too mature, and Veitch quit the book. Later issues of Swamp Thing would be written by horror novelist Nancy A. Collins, Grant Morrison, and Mark Miller, and a whole series of the book was written by Saga creator Brian K. Vaughan, whose stories focused on Tefe Holland, the Swamp Thing's daughter with Abby Arcane. In the DC Universe story Brightest Day, the White Lantern created a new Swamp Thing who was actually Alec Holland rather than just thinking he was. This version was more or less carried over into Swamp Thing Volume 5, which was part of DC's New 52 continuity reboot. This version of the character would become a member of Justice League Dark. The pre-Alan Moore Swamp Thing was the basis of not one but two movies. The first was directed by Nightmare on Elm Street creator Wes Craven and hit theaters in 1982. The sequel, The Return of Swamp Thing, was released in 1989 and inspired a public service announcement in which Swamp Thing stumps for Greenpeace. A television series, Swamp Thing the Series, aired on the USA Network from 1990 to 1993 for a total of 72 episodes. It also inspired an animated series that ran on Fox Kids for a mere 5 episodes in 1991. The animated series also led to 2 different video game spin-offs, one for the original Nintendo and one for Game Boy. A third was planned for the Sega Genesis, but was cancelled before release. Since then, Swamp Thing has been a playable character in LEGO Batman 3 and Infinite Crisis. That's it for this episode of You Think You Know Comics. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Comics Alliance for more comic facts, and check out comicsalliance.com for more comic awesomeness.